You are listening to the Hostage to the Devil podcast. Some listeners may find this content disturbing.
What, Doctor, are ghosts?
Ghosts?
Yes, sir.
Genuine ghosts are visitations by people already dead who are allowed by God to visit the living for some reason or other, usually known to the person visited, but not admitted by them until they wake up. There are some cases where what we call ghosts is demonic infestation of a house or a city or a street. It does happen.
Have you had occasion where you have exorcised a spirit or a ghost or
Yes.
whatever it is
Yes.
from a house, from a
in
structure?
A house, yes. In a house, yes.
Yes.
Going from room to room and expelling the demon. It must be done. I'll be doing that in December in Washington, D.C.
You are in your 70s.
That's right.
Again, I ask you, concern about yourself. Does there not come a time when physically you should refrain from doing this?
Yes, and I have refrained to a large extent. It's nothing like the febrile activity of my 40s and 50s and 60s. No, I haven't. Then I've had open heart surgery and 2 heart attacks. So, simply the nature of things has imposed a certain restraint on me.
Were either one of these heart attacks associated with exorcisms?
One of them was.
One of them was.
Yes, the bad one. But that's the price you pay. And art, we're only here for a short time.
It is true.
So, welcome to Hostage to the Devil podcast, season 2. Today's episode is looking at Emma's experiences at the house. I mean, how long have you been there? 20 odd years now, or?
23 years we've been living there, yeah.
So to read off your sort of synopsis of the book from your Amazon site, the 200-year-old Georgian rectory is a sight to behold, but what secrets, spirits and ghosts lurk behind? When the Tully family purchased this magnificent building in the 1990s, they had big restoration dreams. Little did they know their lives were about to change forever. Fantastic. So first of all, can you introduce the rectory and yourselves as the Tully family, but obviously put it on the map from a geographical point of view to tell the audience where we are and sort of where it all began, sort of the origins of the whole rectory?
Yeah, well, Sharon Rectory is in Donegal, Ireland, and it's in the northwest of more kind of they say the northwest, but it's it's just between 2 little towns called Manor Cunningham and Newton Cunningham. It's a beautiful area. It's very countryside, with trees and stuff. So that the house is actually built, in a very, very location where there's not many people around. So the rectory itself was built in 1775. It did take 15 years to fully construct, so it's quite a big building. There is a big history with the rectory. In 1797 now, there was a double murder that took place. United Irishmen took siege outside the rectory and murdered 2 people. The Wallers were the current residents there at the time, and the lady of the house, she was shot, and the guest, Reverend William Hamilton, that they had that night, that the United Irishmen wanted, he was took out and brutally murdered. So there's a lot of dark history surrounding the house, and there's been many other deaths that has occurred, suicides and just a lot of other things that kind of came up in history along with the Wallers, history. So it's a quite a it's just 200 years of just 240 years of big history there. When my family bought the rectory in the early 90s now, that they did have big restoration dreams. Like they wanted to restore the house to its former glory. When my parents bought the house, they had they heard stories regarding the haunting and everything that that linked to the house. They didn't really know much about the murders that took place, but they had heard rumors of somebody dying in the house, and it was it didn't really stop them. They just were very skeptical. Sorry, Martin, there's something going on here on my laptop. Sorry, you just disappeared on the screen.
That's the usual.
No, but when they bought the house, they started renovations, and a lot of workmen were saying that they were experiencing very strange things. So my parents, they just kind of laughed it off. They kind of thought that they're imagining things, or just trying to scare them when they're going to move into the house. So there was no real kind of the belief there in my parents.
When you say strange things from the workmen, like apparitions or
yeah, they were experiencing the apparitions, and there was a lot of weird things happening with the taps coming on whenever there was no water actually in the house. They were connected to the water at the time. They always felt they were being watched. That was another thing that they had mentioned quite a lot. And that tends to happen a lot in the house. Anybody that comes into the house at all now, they will say that they feel like that they're just something's watching them, even when they're walking through the rooms or corridors or whatever. They would mention about, they just have this eerie feeling. And, I was very young at the time when we moved in, so I didn't have any recollection of any stories with ghosts or history of murders, anything. To me, it was just a big old scary house. When they bought the house, it was in complete ruins. They just needed to start from scratch, just with renovation work. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done, and they relied on my uncle and my grandfather quite a bit, because they would have been in the building kind of trade. So they relied on them mainly, because other workmen, they just never stayed. So when we moved in, we did start to slowly experience things, and I started to experience a lady and come through my room at night. And the first time I seen her, she kind of formed as a mist into a lady. And I kind of just stood in complete shock and misbelief. I didn't know what I was actually witnessing. And I was so young, and, I was only about 6-7 years of age. I couldn't understand what I was actually seeing. And I just watched her just walk straight through my bedroom. And on the other side of my room, there's another doorway that leads into my parents' room. And I just watched her go into my parents' room, and this kind of was a nightly thing that tended to happen with this ghost that we seen. She kind of came in like a blue kind of mist. And shortly after, I didn't know this, but my dad started to experience her and started to see her around the same time I did. And then my mom started to see her. So slowly over time, then, we did get the feeling of there's something else here that we just can't explain. My parents, even though they had experiences, they still were kind of, skeptic believers in the sense, that they just were like, there's an explanation for it. They tried to go out to kind of get an explanation for what they were experiencing. And some things they just couldn't explain. And this was one of them. Actually seeing an apparition, you can't explain what you see. And if one person was seeing it, you kind of, put it down to maybe, is it psychological? But it was whenever there's so many other people that's actually witnessing the same thing, that's where it goes into a bit more unexplainable. So just over time, over the years, the haunting did start to kind of, turn into like a darker kind of sense. I myself would have been affected a lot. I moved into, it must have been maybe in the mid 2000s, I moved into one part of the building that was just recently renovated in that time, which is called the coachman's residence. So this would have been kind of, one of the outer houses that the servants would have lived in. And there was always really an oppressive feeling in the room. Now, whenever it was first renovated, I didn't really go over to that side of the house. It was kind of scary to me. Like, it just felt like there was a really heavy feeling. And, I couldn't explain it. But, my sister, when she came along, she needed the room that I was actually in. So I had to move to the other side of, the other side. And I was getting into my teenage years too. So I wanted my own space. So this was kind of like a wee flat that they kind of, renovated. So when I moved in, just slowly over time, now I did start to kind of, my whole kind of attitude changed. I just was so tired. Physical health was kind of affected, and I could never explain it. But it was like at the time, I didn't really kind of link it to paranormal, anything like that. You just assume that, you're stressed, because I was starting college at the time, and, I was, really under so much pressure with assignments and things. So I was putting it all down to that. It was only whenever I woke up one night and I would have always kept the bathroom light on, which is just shines into the main bedroom area. And I did see at the bottom of the bed there was a really, really tall, dark shadow. It was probably about maybe 7-8 foot tall, and I kind of just froze in the bed. There was no other way to kind of explain it. A lot of people would say, why did you not run? You can't in that moment. You freeze to a sense where you just don't know what to do. I couldn't scream or anything. It was just one of these things where like it just paralyzes you. And I was awake. I know a lot of people would say sleep paralysis, it's a medical thing. I was awake. I've seen it. And it's happened to me many times since then where I've actually seen this shadow. I don't know what it is, but it has like this feeling of dread whenever you see it. You just get this real horrible sense that it's just not a good kind of feeling. And that was okay. That night now was very tense for the rest of the night. I never slept. I kind of just pulled the covers over my head and just prayed it was going to be bright, because I felt like the times that I was in there, the only time I actually could properly sleep was whenever, the morning started to come in and it was starting to get brighter. And that was the only time that I could really sleep, because I felt that I was more safer in daylight. And I know that it was still there in the background, but it's a kind of a thing of where you feel like you wouldn't see it more so in the daylight than what you would see kind of in the nighttime whenever it's just the shadow casting. So just over time then I kind of started to drift away from my family a bit, even though we were all in one area in the house. I was kind of at the side, where the wee flat was, and I started to kind of just redecorate the place myself and put my own touch in it. And I started to slowly kind of, do my own dinners in there and just bits and pieces. I was just kind of drifting away from them. And I just felt like I came under a real kind of sense of just depression. And, I was kind of in a really dark place myself mentally. And, I don't often talk about this in podcasts, or I never really do, because it is very hard to discuss. But I do think that there was something in there that actually was draining me physically. I did see it, and I do think that it was this thing that I was seeing, that it was there. Was it trying to attach itself to me? I don't know. To me, this was all. I experienced all the paranormal things with the blue lady that we were seeing and other little bits and pieces around the house, but this felt heavier. This felt more severe. There was another part of the house where I hated to walk past, was with the cellar door, and it's kind of infamous in the way, because this is where the man that was murdered, that the United Irishmen want, he was dragged from the cellar. So it's always got that kind of that kind of feeling of the atmosphere from that, they say, the stone tape theory, where this kind of energy kind of stays within that area. You've always got that kind of atmosphere there. And I don't know if it was maybe that I was feeling, because I'm, obviously over time I kind of developed, my senses to this, and I kind of became more sensitive to different energies around me, and, just the spirits and stuff around the house, because the house is very active. But between the cellar and the coachman's, they were the two places I felt that there was something not good. There was something negative that was around. And I had mentioned to my parents a couple of times that I do feel like there's something darker here. And they were like, no, there's not. Just, whatever's here is not going to harm you. And, at the back of my head, I knew it, but I kind of just was like, okay, there's nothing here, in the sense of that. So, you just kind of put that front of hoping that it's not going to get any worse.
Before you moved into the rectory, were you a child that always picked up energy like that, or was this something new for you as a child? Right.
Never. I never would have, because the house that we were in previous, there was never anything that I ever felt there. It only seemed to be whenever I moved into this rectory, and the first time I seen this blue lady, it was kind of like from then on, it just seemed to be, everywhere I went, then she was just kind of there in the house. And
was the blue lady malevolent, like this dark shadow entity?
No, she, at the very start, now we didn't know her intentions. It was kind of the things that was happening around the blue lady. My mum would be, at night, she would be praying, just pleading with her just to leave. And, she would turn around and she'd be like, just let me sleep tonight. and that would be a night that they would get sleep. But 7 a.m. in the morning, they would hear a bang at the bottom of the bed. There would have been an old trunk, and it would have been that she would have hit it or something, because they would have heard this bang. And it would have frightened. It definitely would have frightened the two of them, both my parents. And for me, whenever I seen her, I was just terrified. On one occasion, she came in, and in the middle of the night, and I always slept with the light on, but even with the dim light that I had, I still seen her in the room. And she came in and she sat in the bottom of the bed, and I had the covers over my head, and I knew she was just sitting beside me because I felt the bed sink. And then I started to hear her humming, and I was like, what is she doing? And it was just, it felt like it was hours that she was there, and I was just praying for her to go. And she just left then, was no sooner than she was there. So
what was she humming? Like a tune, or
like a kind of I can't even describe it. It was something that you wouldn't hear in this day and age, but it was like kind of a
yeah.
And I don't know if maybe she was trying to comfort me, but for me, I didn't know then what this meant, who she was, whatever. But now looking back, she's an intelligent spirit. She obviously knew she was trying to interact with me. So
yeah. Would have scared the absolute crap out of me.
See, this is
totally honest with you. I would have scared the crap out of me.
Of course, it would scare a lot of people. With my mum and dad, the experience my mum had with her, that kind of turned mum into thinking that she isn't negative, she's not, was an awful dream my mum had, and I write about it in my book, where she just kind of went into this kind of deep sleep, but it was really vivid because she remembers every detail of this dream. And it was when she was going through the house and she was calling for me, and she went out the front door to call for me. And we would have had 2 Labrador dogs at the time, and I was an outdoor child. I was always outside running around. And just a few weeks prior, my dad had put in a big pond at the bottom of the garden. And I would have always been kind of down around with the dogs, around the garden playing. And when she walked out the door, she was calling for me, but she seen me in the distance. And she was going through the trees, and she kept calling for me. And as soon as she spotted me near the pond, I had disappeared, and the 2 dogs were left. And she said that she was looking into the water, and she dived in looking for me. And when she pulled me out, I was in a pillowcase, and I was like a newborn baby, and I was dead. But she woke up screaming, and she says the bottom of the bed was Mrs. Waller, the blue lady. And she says that she had her head kind of tilted to the side, as in sympathy for what she dreamt. So mum then kind of thought, is this a sense where she's trying to warn us about this pond? It's a danger to the family, it's danger to me. And there was no hesitation. My mum contacted her brother, who was a digger man, and he came up within a few days, and the pond was gone. And just that was kind of then made mum believe that no, she's not here to harm us. She's only here to kind of protect, if anything.
All right.
So it I do think that she was a positive spirit, and she still is a positive spirit. She still is a big protector around Sharon. And I do think if she wasn't here, kind of in a sense, there would be a lot more darker things happening, because I do think that she kind of tries to keep it at bay. The other things now that I did experience in the Coachman's when I was a teenager living there. I went into the bathroom.
Just remind me what the Coachman's is. Is that a separate building to the rectory?
The separate building, the separate Coachman residence. So whenever I was in there, in the bathroom area, just preparing to go to bed one night, and I was just brushing my teeth, and I looked in the mirror, and just directly behind me was just a plain tiled wall, and I seen a face come through the wall and back in again through the mirror. And when I looked around, there was nothing there. And it was just, I felt like that there was eyes watching me, and I hated being in that bathroom. I felt like I couldn't even shower in the bathroom. It was just, you always felt eyes on you every time you were in there. It was just a horrible sense, a horrible feeling. And I didn't know maybe if this dark thing, this dark shadow that I was seeing, was it connected to whatever I was seeing through the wall in the bathroom? But just, it all started to make sense over time to me. And whenever I did get to a point where I couldn't live in the Coachman's anymore, I write about it more in detail in my book. I hate discussing it, but there was a point in time where I did try and commit suicide. from being in there, and I don't know if it was linked to whatever was in there that just egged it on, and I do think that
the oppressive feelings and a
real oppressive feeling, but even the feeling of just being drained, physically sick, waking up and being physically sick, completely drained your body. My mum would have to come in and maybe 2 o'clock in the day and try and wake me up, because I was just so drained, and I was like, just leave me in for another while, and just never having energy. And just eventually, when I became old, got older and I had my family, I moved out, and I was away from the house for a while, and I felt fine, completely normal. If whatever normal is, it was nothing like what I was living in Sharon. Yeah. It was just, there was no oppressive feeling, no depression, no nothing. And that's when it twigged to me, and I thought there has to be something in that part of the house that was actually causing me to be in that state.
Yeah.
I have no other explanation. Anytime I went to the doctor about my tiredness, about anything, they could never explain it. They said, you're physically fine. There's nothing we can actually see showing up in bloods. And it was just unexplainable of that time. And I was putting it all down to maybe was it stress from college and things like, but now, years later, and seeing what I've experienced over the years, and even what I've experienced since then in the house, I have to put it down to something's in the house that's actually causing it. Whenever I did leave, I was fearful for my sister then, because she was experiencing kind of a darker kind of time. So it felt like it kind of went from me to her. And I don't know, it was maybe because they probably thought we were vulnerable in the house, when my mum and my dad are very, very strong-minded people, very spiritually strong. My mum, if anything, she's the strongest woman I've known when it comes to, whatever she's experienced in the house. She hasn't always stood her ground. So many people came over to us and says, why are you even still in the house? And my mum's like, nothing will scare me from that house.
So your parents and your sister are still there?
Yeah, parents and my sister still there. They still live in the main house. I live in the gatehouse. It's just outside just on still on the property. It's just at the back of the house. Yeah. I still experience things in this house. So it's been a hell of a ride. Whenever in 2019, I just started writing about, my experiences. I just started a little kind of vlog on Facebook, and I just started writing about my experiences, of what's happened through the years. And it just seemed to escalate from there. Everybody was so interested in our experiences. And, I would always been kind of stopped, along the street if I was out shopping, or just people who knew me. And they were like, please tell me the story of Sharon Rectory and, all your experiences, what you've had. There's so many people was interested in, the story and what we experienced. But 20 years ago, people laughed at us. It's only now that people's actually starting to kind of become more open-minded to the spirit world, and, of something that's, that's non-human. A lot more people are actually starting to believe in all these things now. So
you say your mum's religious and heavily grounded, and so was she ever up for bringing in a priest to bless the house? Or
my cousin is actually a priest, and he's come in and he's blessed the house, and it may stay calm for a short period, but it's only a temporary fix. These things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I do believe what's here. There's many different levels of spiritual things in this property. Like, it's not just spirits and ghosts, and there's something darker here, but there's something that's also, I think, that was on the property long before the house was built. I do believe it could be elemental. I do believe that it is something in that sense. We have fairy rings outside the house. I know a lot of people about fairies, folklore kind of things like that. They're very kind of skeptical on it. But in my book, I write about that at the very beginning of the what had happened there, linking to fairies. And I think that either it's a coincidence or it's something really kind of, there's something to it.
Yeah.
But there's definitely so many different layers here, and it's a house that draws people in, no matter how many experiences we've had, bad or good. It draws so many people in. There's many people has read my book and has contacted me and says, I can't stop thinking about your house since I've read the book. Is there any way I can see the house? I want to experience it for myself. And I do say to people, I'm like, even if you were to come to a house in one day, it's not like you can guarantee to see something, because that doesn't work like that. You would need to be here for a while to actually experience something, or you could randomly just turn up 5 minutes and see something and you can leave again. It's really unpredictable.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of people don't understand. They say that they want to experience these things, but a lot of these things that I've experienced and my family experienced can deeply affect people. It can, a lot of people may never recover from what they've seen or what they've found, because I've heard horror stories of other people not being able to cope with things that they've seen and never been able to talk about it, never been able to open up about it, and that just let that eat away at them inside, because the fear of maybe somebody never believing them. For me, I started to openly talk about my experiences in 2019, publicly, just writing my blog and writing, telling people about writing my book. And it attracted so many paranormal investigators, and they wanted to come in and, investigate the property for themselves. And the majority of people that came in and investigate the property all have left with some weird things that they've caught and unexplainable things, and have had unexplainable, experiences. And there's been maybe just a handful of people that came in and thought, well, there's nothing really that I can see here.
Have they been respectful in the sense of, I find a lot of teams will come in, investigate, and they'll basically try or intensify activity because maybe the entity wants to show off or whatever is provoked, and it hasn't been closed down properly in a sense.
Yeah.
So did you find a lot of teams are quite sort of irresponsible in that sense?
All the people that's ever came to Sharon team-wise have all been lovely people. I do think that there are some, that maybe didn't realize that what has been here, that maybe they went and they came in and they thought, it's nothing too serious, and then maybe aggravated a bit, and then realizing, okay, this is something maybe that's beyond my control. Because I think that's very important when you are an investigator, is to kind of, there's a boundary there, and if you cross that boundary, it's, it can be very dangerous for you and for people around you or people in that location. And I think that, just over the years now, I've, for myself, like I've kind of realized the approach that you need to take, especially with a haunting that has a negative kind of vibe to it. You need to be respectful. You need to be so careful investigating areas like this, because we put a stop to investigations. It was only a few, the months in 2019, there was a few months we did have a break because it was ramping up activity. So like we would have investigations at the weekend, and it would be an aftermath we would deal with it, the week ahead. Then, you would be just dealing with activity constantly. And, it just was a bit much to live in a property like that and then constantly have it investigated. But that's like any location. The more times it's investigated, the more active it'll get. So no, we put a stop to the end of 2019. It was November 2019. We had an investigation, and that was the final straw for me. That was the most terrifying experience I've ever had in the house. That whole night was crazy.
Can you talk us through that night for us then?
Yeah, well, that night we were doing the investigation as normal, and it just seemed to be that it was just a real active night in general. And I think when you're investigating that, when it's active enough, it's making it worse. So the darker thing that night really started to show itself. We were doing kind of a vigil in the dining room, and I was affected that night where I felt like I was about to pass out, and I was taken out. And the only way I can describe it is that I felt like I was burning in hell. That is the only way I can describe it. My whole body was burning from the inside out. You could feel my skin through my thing burning, my clothes, and I felt all right after a few minutes. But my mum, she's a very spiritual person. She's a gifted medium now. She's developed it over time, because she's living in such an active location. I think a lot of people will either shy away from it or develop it. And I feel like that all of us have kind of developed it because, you kind of embrace the kind of living in a haunted house. So you either have to move away and forget about it, or, put up with it and try and learn how to protect yourself and learn how to deal with these entities and spirits. And my mom then just, she developed herself over time, and, she's trans medium, and something channeled through her that night that really terrified me, because I thought that I wasn't going to get her back. And, we were trying, me and my friend, she's a psychic medium. She's been with us from day one, Kate Houston. She's a gifted psychic medium, and she's she's a person that I trust, and she would be the only person that I would trust around to help me with something like this. But that night when my mum was channeling this, her voice was changing, her face was changing, and there was somebody that was actually sitting behind her that says they seen the chair levitate a bit. And I do think that it was close to possession that night rather than channeling.
Yeah.
It was very, very scary. It took a lot for me and Kate to try and get whatever it was out, because we were constantly praying with her. And I had my rosary beads and I put them on her head. And I was like, please leave. And I think it was just the love that we have for her and just the worry we had that kind of really helped her through that night. But
you also say your mum's quite religious as well. I mean, for a possession to take place, you've got to give you have a strong over.
Kind of So it wasn't like I was doing an exorcism or anything that night. I was just trying to get whatever it was away.
Yeah.
And I looked at Kate at one point, and Kate was looking down at my mum, and she seen like a black mist come out of her mouth. And mum started to come around, and she just was saying, I could feel it in my hands. I can still feel it in my hands. Don't let my hand go.
Yeah.
And she was just fine after 5 minutes. I think her blood pressure was a bit high after it, but that I looked at everybody that night and I was like, I'm calling it. That is it. No more investigations in this house. This is because that is the final straw.
Yeah.
And it kind of angered me in a sense, because I thought, it got out of control. It really did get out of control. And if it wasn't, I think whatever was there was trying to get me away from my mum, so it affected me first before it could actually really, affect her. Because there was a moment whenever I came out of the room after I felt ill, and mum came out with a different voice, that's one down. So it was trying to slowly get away people to try and take effect. We were very, very frightened after that investigation, staying in the house, because it was kind of lingering for a while after. We did have ministers come in, because we thought, we've tried a lot of different approaches. A lot of people say try sage. I'm like, sage isn't going to shift this.
Not easy. Yeah.
And even my mum is steady burning sage and frankincense and loads of different kind of things in the house. And she would even go around the house with holy water. And at one point there was a time where she was going around the house with holy water, and holy water was thrown out of her hand. So, it's just, we've tried everything. It's not like we haven't tried to get rid of things in the house. When ministers came, they were saying, that, their beliefs was completely kind of a way out there from my mum's and everything. And it just didn't sit well with anybody of how they wanted to do all this.
What were their initial responses to when they arrived at the house? Were they very much sort of like just going for the motion?
They were very kind of quiet. They were very quiet. I feel like that they didn't really say much, because I think whatever was there probably scared them, because they probably sensed it. And I think that it kind of might have been out of their domain. I don't know. I just think that it was probably, they did keep in touch after, and they were saying, that we need to, my mum, would be very kind of into her fairies and things. And, she had she's very spiritual in a sense where she she has Buddha statues and things, and they were in going, that's a platform for negative entities, and that's a platform. And my mum's like, but that's a statue. It's not going to hurt nobody. And it's not like it's a religion. It's spiritual, exactly, it's positive. It's all positive things. It wasn't like it was. And I know fairies can be, very malicious and devious and stuff but they were only just wee figurines. It wasn't, that statue isn't going to, cause harm in the house. So it was just things like that kind of didn't sit well with my mum. So it didn't work out with them. But there has been loads of other people, psychic mediums that we've had in, and a lot of psychic mediums would have came and picked all, the things up in the house, and they do believe that there's definitely something demonic here. Yeah. It's very crafty, because if there's somebody that's powerful enough that can come, it hides. So it's like it knows long before.
Oh yeah.
It knows long before this person comes that they're coming.
So this is why you've got to really be embedded. For an investigation to really take place, you got to be embedded in the location, and like you say, it'll appear and when it wants to appear, and and show off when it wants to show off.
See an investigation like Sharon Rectory, to investigate a location like that. one investigation doesn't do it. And a lot of people, come in, it'll be like one investigation, do one night's investigation, there's nothing here, and then they walk away. That one night could be just a quiet night.
Exactly.
And we experience it from time to time, and it's bliss. It could be, we could have a month that would have nothing happen, or we could have weeks that have nothing happen, or days. It does. It's not like it's, you're walking around every corner and you're bumping into a ghost. It's you try and get up and live your life. You don't go around looking for it, but it's always there in the background. Things is always happening. I just think you just get up and you get on with it. I experience a lot of shadows in this house. You've seeing them in the corner of your eye when you're walking from room to room, even during the day. I've been physically touched, where I'm like, my clothes have been grabbed, and you look around, you're thinking it's one of the kids, they're not here, and then you're like, okay, well, it's just something. So you just walk on and just continue with your day. There has been,
like, scratch you at all, or any...
Yeah, there has been attacks. We've had physical attacks. Me and my sister would be more so. And I do think it all mounts down to because they think that we're more vulnerable than my parents. I've had been physically scratched. Whenever I was living in the coachman's residence, I was physically scratched and I was bit. I would have woke up with like mysterious marks and bites in my legs, and I was like, what is that? And I would never have thought paranormal at the time. And it was, as I say, like, it was only later in the years, then you're like, okay, this is all adding up to one thing that it seems to be kind of coming from. And whenever I moved in here, things kind of started to happen. I was getting 2 times now in the same place. I had like a burn in the back of my neck, and to me it looks like a rope burn. And before this burn or this attack that I did receive now, one of my security cameras actually caught a still image on something hanging in the tree, and to me it looks like a white dress hanging in the tree. And I didn't know until I looked through the gallery in my phone one day, and it was just a still shot from the security camera. And I went out and I was trying to look to see if there was maybe something that was kind of causing that kind of shape. And I can't explain it. And Kate, our psychic medium, we discussed it with her, and she reckons that somebody was actually hung out in the tree. And was that attack that I was getting with a rope burn? Was it something maybe that was from that was attacking me? Yeah. My sister, she has been marked several times. She's had burns and scratches, and she's been kind of feeling physically down with it from time to time too. But since, I'd say maybe in the last maybe 2-3 years, she's been really, really, she's like my mom now. She's really strong headed, and she's like, fuck it, I don't care anymore now. She just, she tries to kind of keep positive, because I think when you feed that with like, negative thoughts, and you're feeling that you're depressed and you're angry, that all feeds a negative energy. All, like, if you have any kind of negative energy in a location, and you're going in with negative thoughts, so that all affects the negative, and it grows it kind of feeds it. So it's just been a pick a mix of energies here. It's been a crazy kind of 23 years living here, and I do hope we'll be here for many, many years to come. I would love to keep Sharon Rectory within my family, and pass down the generation.
You mentioned a lot about your dad and your mum and her struggles and getting on with it. Where did your dad fit in all this? Is he just like a typical Irish?
He's just a typical man that just, he'll see things. He's talked about seeing, he reckons the man that was murdered in the house, William Hamilton, the man that was murdered by the United Irishman, he's seen him a few times. He says that, in one area of the house, we call it the library, but a few years ago, they had it as like my dad had like a man cave, so he would have been sat in there in the evening times, and he would just walk around the whole house dark in the pitch black. If there was nobody in the house, he would walk around in the pitch dark, wouldn't put a light on, walk around outside. He's just doesn't seem to be scared of anything. And he was sitting one night in the library, and he was just drinking his cup of coffee, just listening to music. And he says, just at the doorway, he just seen the silhouette of this man all dressed in black. And he says he watched him kind of walk towards him. And he says he got up, and there was an armchair. And he says he got up and he sat in the other sofa. He says he felt like this man needed to sit in the armchair. And he says he just got up and just watched him. And then he says he just disappeared. And he says he's met him on the staircase, the main staircase, a couple of times too. This man all dressed in black, and he reckons that's William Hamilton.
Have you in your own research, have you tried to sort of trace this blue lady historically, or?
Yeah, it is the murdered victims of Mrs. Waller, the lady of the house. It's that's who she is. That's the blue lady we were seeing.
So do you think it's because it was that a solved case back then, or was that an unresolved?
It was the United Irishmen, and it was a brutal attack. That the Irish, he was just a target for just his beliefs, and kind of it was all political kind of at the time, so he was kind of a wanted man with the United Irishmen, and there was an unsuccessful attack, I think, the previous year in his own vicarage, and then he was just targeted then. I think he was kind of set up to go to Sharon Rectory that night, and just it's just been it's just there. That was where his story ended.
Do you think that they'll ever find peace, or are they attached to the house purely because of the crimes that were committed and the awful atrocities? Or
from what we've got from Reverend Hamilton, he feels that.
Sorry, who's Reverend Hamilton?
Reverend Hamilton's the man that died, the man that was murdered in the house. From what we've picked up from him, from psychic mediums and just different people's walk through the house, is that he, from his crimes and his kind of sins in his life, he feels like in death he's scared to move any go away, move. Do you know, move on? Because I feel like that he's going to be punished for his sins, and he's kind of he wants to reside there. He doesn't want to shift. He wants to stay. Okay. He doesn't seem to be. He's a dominant presence, but he doesn't seem to be a presence in the sense where he's going around attacking you or going out to actually harm you. I just think that he's just going to be there from time to time. People's going to see him, and then he'll just disappear again. It's just going to be one of these spirits is always going to be there in the background. As for Mrs. Waller, now we do feel like that she's at peace, because I write about that in my book too, where Kate Houston, the first time we were introduced to her, she was trying to help us with Mrs. Waller, and we were trying to find help her find peace. That was another night that was insane. There was a seance took place in the house, and the things that happened that night was crazy. I was 6, 7, and I was in the kitchen area, and my dad was praying the whole night, and in the big dining area, there was just a few people around the table, including the psychic medium, and my mum and my granny was there, and they just started the seance, and she slowly started to come forward, and they says that everybody around the table experienced kind of what she felt in a sense before she died. So Kate, the psychic medium, says she felt a gunshot, but she says she felt like she was hit kind of in the shoulder, and that's where Mrs. Waller was supposedly shot, and she was supposedly shot in her ear too. And my grandmother, she heard a gunshot, and then my mum then just broke down in tears. So it was kind of like, all these kind of emotions were kind of just kind of channeled through them. And she kind of formed as like a teardrop and the table, unless they all sat around the table. Now there was people that was there that night, that was reporters, that they actually reported it on a newspaper of everything that went on.
Wow.
And they were in misbelief. They were just like, is this actually happening? Because everybody was skeptic coming in thinking they weren't going to see anything. And this blue teardrop just formed, and then it just went straight up into the ceiling and disappeared.
Wow.
And what makes it even more weirder is that my grandmother's neighbour lives up the hill, just up the road, right next to her. It's only about 5 minutes away, but you can see the top of Sharon Rectory just from that area.
Yeah.
And he says that he couldn't sleep one night, and this particular night, and he was outside, he was walking around the house, and he says it was about maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. He says he's seen a blue light coming from Sharon Rectory's roof, and this would have tied into what whenever they done the seance that night. And Kate did believe Mrs. Waller found peace that night, but she says that she'll always be able to come back to check up and make sure that everybody's okay in the house, because she says that she's so attached to the property.
Yeah.
Because
it's beautiful when you told me about that story about or that event where she warned your mum about the pond. That's beautiful. Yeah, it's
so that's how we knew that her tensions were good. It wasn't like she was out of her way to kind of scare us out of the house. It wasn't like that.
So what are your thoughts about the demonic entity in the house then, and then the origins of that?
I do think that there's definitely something dark in the house, and it's very, very crafty, very smart. There has been numerous investigations that took place that's kind of, resulted in definitely it's negative that's here. I do think that not only that, I do think that there's elemental, and it's there's not really much that I can kind of research in elementals because it is very rare. It's a very rare haunting. Yeah. But from talking
just for the audience members who doesn't know what elemental is, can you explain briefly?
An elemental is basically it's like a spirit of the earth. They say it can be kind of conjured up in a location through. It's very hard to explain because even for me it's really hard to try and research these things. But it's like it's non-human. It's not a human. It never has ever walked the earth as human. It's kind of like. It maybe forms in a sense of mist or in like a light. A lot of that would kind of link into elemental. It's really Kate has told me about elementals is that when they're very low in energy, they can become negative. So they can actually kind of attack and become mischievous. So that's going from that. That's what I can really kind of find from it. And that's what Kate told me. But there is an elemental supposed to have been in Leap Castle. So that's the only other elemental that I would have known in Ireland that I've heard about. And I do think that that's the ancient thing that's here long before the house was built. That's on the property. It's attached to the property. Whatever kind of maybe going back to maybe the pagan times. It could have been maybe all linking into that. Yeah. Maybe that was conjured through some rituals. I have no idea, but it's on the property. It's been seen. There has been a black dog that's been seen too. I forgot to talk about that. Before my parents even bought the property, it was about 10 years previous. The house was kind of laying empty at the time, and it was before it kind of really came into ruins. They came down the back laneway one night and they parked really close up to the back gate. And whenever they were deciding whether or not will they get out of the car, because it was starting to get kind of dark, and they were kind of going on, they heard the stories, and all of a sudden, just before they got out of the car, there was this black dog just appeared out of nowhere, and it started to run towards the gates, and it just ran straight through the closed gates without injuring itself whatsoever. It kind of banged up against the car and disappeared. And my dad looked at my mum and he put the car in reverse straight up to the house, or right up to the top of lane, sorry. And he was like, that freaked me out. They couldn't explain it. But it never put them off. They kind of thought maybe
that's what I love about your mum and dad.
But it was the way it
just love it. You just get on with it like a ghost,
they just are like, oh sure,
a dog
whatever.
entity smashes against the car.
Yeah, I never knew this story. And then whenever we moved into the house, we were in it for a while, and I was outside with my dogs one day, and I was walking down the back lane, and all of a sudden my two dogs started to sense something. And they kind of went over to the hedge, and I thought, was it a rabbit, a cat? What are they seeing? And then out jumps this massive black dog. It was like nothing I've ever seen before. I can't even describe the breed of dog, because it just seemed to be like a mix of everything. And it was like scruffy looking, and it had bright red eyes, and it looked at me like it was just about to just jump through me. And I started to kind of call to my dogs to come back, because I thought they're going to challenge this thing and they're never going to be able to fight it.
Yeah.
And it just turned and ran away. And then my two dogs ran after it. And I ran kind of over the corner, and the two dogs were like looking around, looking for this dog, and the dog had vanished. And I ran straight into my mum, and I told my mum, and my mum's face just went pale, because she had this experience with this dog years previous.
Yeah.
And I never knew the story. So she was like, how did she know that's the story? So this must be something kind of weird. So this dog has been seen in the property many times since then, and maybe that's connected to the elemental too, because they say that maybe they could be shapeshifters, where they can transform into like animals and things, so that's connecting to that too.
Interesting stuff. I mean, a full array of characters on the rectory. So
There's
Let's
so
just throw in
much
the
here.
dog.
You just don't know who you're going to bump into.
And what is, we're going to wrap up now, but what's the future for the rectory? Obviously, the Tully family want to stay now, or have they gone too far down the road not to go?
No, we're going to stay here. There's nothing kind of going to scare us away. We've been through that much. I don't think it would take a lot to scare us away now. What I've seen and what I've experienced over the 23 years has been crazy. I've always said that my life is like a horror movie, because it's just, you feel like you go through a stage of kind of calm, and then it just goes mad, and then it's like calm again, and then you just don't know what's around the corner, to be totally honest. You just don't know what to expect, and that's what any haunting.
From my own experiences, it just always used to catch me off guard, always caught me off guard, where it just happened. Like it was you never. Sometimes I never sensed it before it happened. It just happened that it's like, wow, you just never expect it.
And then people are saying, why did you not take a picture of it? I'm like, well, you're caught off guard. It's not like you're going to think, right, I'm going to get my phone now and try and take a picture of it, because it doesn't work like that. And 20 years ago, there was no phone, camera phones then, so you wouldn't have been able to take out your phone to take a picture of sort of thing that you see. So,
where can people find out more about the rectory?
Well, you can follow me on Sharon Rectory Ireland on Facebook, Sharon Rectory Donegal Ireland, and then Sharon Rectory Donegal Ireland on Instagram. And I just put up regular write-ups of just what we experience from day to day, or from time to time. And then you can get my book then on Amazon and Kindle, so it's available on both them.
And what's the book called on Amazon?
Oh, the Haunting of Sharon Rectory. Sorry,
that's quite important.
Got about that one.
And I know you say you've closed down investigations from 2019, but would you be willing to allow me to come and have a little look around and get a vibe of the place?
Yeah, we can maybe see what you feel. Sure, you might be too spooked. You might only just come on the door and say no.
No, trust me, I'm pretty much I'm spooked out myself. So. All right, Emma. So thanks for tuning in and calling in, and
thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll get over to the place and have a little walk around and report back to the audience. But thanks so much for coming on tonight, and
thank
good
you.
luck for the future.
Thanks now.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Good morning, Father. I have something that has been bothering me for about a month and a half now.
Yes, sir.
And it occurred when I was in bed laying on my side.
Yes.
And I was tapped on the shoulder.
Yes.
And I turned my head up towards the bottom of the bed, and there was a big dark entity there.
Yes.
And he was grabbing me at my feet and trying to pull me.
Is this the first time this happened to you?
Yes.
How long did it last?
It seemed like for 20 seconds.
Has it occurred again?
No, it hasn't.
Okay. Do you practice any religion?
No, I don't.
Well, I'll tell you, might be a good idea to pray, because I don't think you were drunk.
No, I was not.
No, I'm sure you weren't. I say that. I don't think you were. You sound very sober in mind, in judgment. Then this is what we call an obsessional harassment. It's probably a great mercy that it's done to you, because it may wake your soul to worship God.
I do believe in Jesus Christ, and
good.
But this has been extremely bothersome of myself.
It should be. I'll tell you. Have you got a pencil?
Yes, I do.
Write down.
Go ahead.
O creature of God. In the name of God who created you.
Okay.
And in the name of Jesus who saved me, I exorcise you. Now, drop all fear. You have nothing to be afraid of.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
spit those words in its eye. Okay?
Thank you very much, Father.
God bless.
Good luck.